I'm not sure the date of when I came here to Holy Trinity, but my daughter was in the sixth grade, and she and I had gone to church continually, but my husband hadn't. She came home one day and said, "Mom, I just wish we could go to church as a family." And she said, "The Shamanans go with their whole family. I wish we could go." And that's all it took. My husband and I came, and we all joined. We were both very active in the church. I think I was on every committee except I think they finally took me off of kitchen detail. And that is kind of a strange incident. But I was supposed to burn the candles, there were about 12 or 13 of them, down because they were too high. And I think at that time Pastor Smith was here. He said, "Nancy, why don't we put them over on this side?" So we put them over underneath the cabinets by the sink. And I was watching them closely, but sometime in there I must not have. Because if you go down in the kitchen, there is one cabinet that has a light tan look. That's because it caught on fire. So I don't think I was on that duty in the kitchen too long. And anyways, we had a very enjoyable time for a good number of years. And then I think about that time, Pastor Lambert came, and my daughter was married in the chapel, June 25th. I forget the year, but she's now going on 29 years. So that was quite eventful. And soon after that, then her children were born. And both of them were baptized in the church, in the sanctuary. And what was significant about that to me was my daughter asked, "Mom, is it all right if I use your wedding dress for Mariana's dress?" I said, "I'd be thrilled to pieces." So Pastor Lambert baptized her. She had a beautiful gown. I think I paid $78, and I don't even remember the horrible price that they paid to have it done over. And then when my grandson came along, Brant, she had a pair of rompers made out of the same dress. So those are the real happy events that I remember. And she was married in the chapel by Pastor Lambert. And then after my husband was in the hospital, Pastor Mackey came in to see him. He'd never met him before. I hadn't gotten back to church. And he said, I think it is almost his closing words, "Nancy, I wish you'd get back to church. I really like that pastor." So that's how I came back again. And now I haven't quite gotten back yet, but I hope to one of these days. But it was a very enjoyable time here, and the friends that we met and contributed to, I think we helped do the church. And, well, that isn't right what I said. So my husband was very active, especially when it came to any military affairs. He always ended up being the speaker. Of course, I think he did a very good job. And he was on church council, but I was just on a lot of the other committees. And I will say I'm glad to see that Pastor Kathy is here and have met her, and I do hope to get back. If not, everyone here is in my heart, and I will always remember my time as a participant. But at my age now, there isn't much I can participate in. And I'm just thankful that I was a member as long as I was and still am. Thank you.
You. It's honored to be interviewed. I'd like to discuss three separate areas. The first area is Pastor Ray C. Smith and his activity here. He's really the one that was here when the church was built. It did so much for us. I'd like to discuss how I became a member, and Shirley can tell you how she became a member. And I'd like to also discuss what I think the church has done for my family and myself. To start off about Pastor Smith was in Little League. I believe he's from Springfield. And he came up to Mansfield in a Little League conference. Exactly what happened is lost in time. But whatever it was, it didn't go well. It didn't go well because as he left, he told everyone, including his family, "I am never in my entire life coming back to Mansfield." Well, the Lord had a little different plan for the pastor. When he graduated from seminary, uh, he came back to Mansfield to become and set up a church as a young pastor. One of the things I can remember, I don't know why, I guess I was a youngster, about 8 years old. I was shocked because he said, "You see this vacant lot out here that we have? Well, this vacant lot's going to have a big, beautiful church on it." Well, I looked at it and it was a vacant lot. But that was what he said, and that is what occurred. The way I became a member was primarily because my father went to Ohio State, and at Ohio State he was active in the Lutheran Church. And he had, who later became Dr. Zander, was his pastor. And so Dr. Zander, who was, for lack of a better term, a big shot in the Lutheran Church, came back with Pastor Smith to set up a church, and he wanted to see how his old Neil Robinson was doing, and so he called upon him. Now, in the meantime, my dad had gone to agricultural school and had a dairy. When you have a dairy on Sunday morning, who's going to milk the cows? Well, he had to. Well, what happened was he gave up the dairy and went into real estate and auctioneering. However, he didn't start going to church. My mom was a really, really good Methodist and would do anything to get him to church, and said, "Look, I'll go to any church you go to if you will go." Well, when Pastor Zander talked to my dad was noticeably embarrassed, according to my mother, because he didn't have a dairy excuse anymore and he wasn't going to church. He then became a lifelong member of Holy Trinity. He was, I believe, on the church council, took a very active part in the church, and I guess raised us within the church. What happened with us that I became a member, of course, I can remember the first service I went to. And the first service I went to was on Klein Avenue. And if you look at Klein Avenue in Lexington, there was an old Burger King that's a restaurant. If you go on Klein Avenue, there's a alley, and behind that there's a little church. At that time, it was a Seventh-day Adventist church. That was the first place we went. There had been services at a Catholic or another church before that was Jewish. I think in the time that I was there, I was on church council for 6 years. During part of the time, I was president of council. I think some of the highlights that I remember was burning the mortgage, and we burned the mortgage. Of course, it wasn't the actual mortgage, it was a copy, but we did it inside the church, and fortunately, we didn't burn the church down. We did have a fire extinguisher close by, and in front of the whole church, we lit a copy of the mortgage, and we burned it. And it was a big deal, because we were paying a lot of money every single month on that. You can imagine today we don't have to worry about that in our budget. At that time, that was such a big thing. Some of the things I remember from Pastor Smith, one of the things when I was on council, he wouldn't take a pay raise. He wanted the money to go to the church. Now, nobody expects a pastor not to be paid appropriately, so we looked at what other pastors were making, and they were making more, but he didn't want a pay raise. Well, we gave him a pay raise anyway, but it never was really what probably he could have asked for. He took ownership of the church, basically. It was his church. He wanted the church to have the money and not himself. My children, who both were baptized here, went to catechism here along with myself. And I think that was a very beneficial thing for both of us. I think basically the children got good Christian values from going to Holy Trinity. And I think that is something that's beneficial. My son Michael plays the trumpet, as most of you know. And one of the reasons I think that helped him develop to be as better trumpet player was once Pastor Smith found out that he played the trumpet, he was playing the trumpet a lot from the time that he was in grade school. And so he had 100 solos before he tried out for solos with the Lexington band, so he had a little bit of advantage over the other kids. And the church was very, very good place to learn that. I do recall Pastor Smith wanted a sunrise service, and in the sunrise service, he wanted to have somebody play the trumpet. Well, so he had Michael, will you do it? Sure. And Michael got up at 4 o'clock in the morning because he said, Dad, I got to get my lip ready. I can't just get up at 6 and play. So he got up at 6 o'clock or 4 o'clock. He came and he played. He did a good job. So it was all okay. And I think it was a great learning experience for him. You know, you really think what Holy Church, what the church has meant to me. I think it's been a real blessing to have seen this lot turned into this church. What a blessing it is for me to have seen that in my lifetime. It's something that I really value. And I think when I come to church and I look at the people that attend, you're all my family. It's like you're part of our family. And so I really appreciated that. And now let me turn it over to the better half.
Oh, thank you. I became a Lutheran and joined Holy Trinity because I married a Robinson, and they were all Lutherans and members of Holy Trinity. So my first memory, he brought me to church. I don't think we were even married, and I had come from a small country church, Congregational Christian Church, later became a United Church of Christ, and I wasn't used to all of this formality with the liturgy and the kneeling. So after we went outside, I went and looked at the sign because I was sure he'd brought me to a Catholic church. Anyway, I went on to take the adult catechism, join the church, and 56 years later, Holy Trinity is definitely my Christian family. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we're glad to be here to share the memories of our journey at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. I found a few things at home. One time, not too long ago, somebody asked for us to bring things that we had about the church because they were going to put them all in scrapbooks and everything. I think they did. So I didn't have much left, but I have proof that we joined the church back in 9/28/63. 1963. We can hardly believe that, but that's how long we have been here. And we have always thought of Holy Trinity as our family, and they continue to be our family. When we first came to Holy Trinity, we had 3 little girls, and before I get into that, I was going to say that I started teaching Sunday school before we were even members. They had so many young people, kiddies here, and young families, and they asked if I would teach Sunday school, and I said, sure. So then, of course, we joined, and we are very happy that we did. I was going to say that when we joined, we just had the chapel. And with 3 little girls and myself to get ready on Sunday morning to come to church, we never could get here early enough to get into the chapel. It was so full that it would be full, and they had chairs down the hallway to what is now the pastor's office, and you could also sit in the office. And we usually ended up sitting in the hallway because that was the only place that was left by the time we could get here. And then, of course, we added on with the new sanctuary and have plenty of room, and for many, many years, that was always full also. And as you were saying,
over the time, the church thought is it was so crowded always. Even when we had the big open, it was still full, particularly for the holidays.
they put extra chairs down the aisles so we could get everybody in. And it was young. We had a very young congregation, young couples, and lots of kids. And I was telling the pastor that we'd go for 2 or 3 years and we wouldn't even have a death in the congregation because we were just young people. And when we had vacation Bible school, my kids said they thought that we had at least 100 people, 100 kids here, plus all the teachers. And it was wonderful. And if only we could do that again, it would be fantastic. We thought the pastor was going to ask us questions, but I was looking at it and it says, what significant family religious things. We had 3 daughters were married here at Holy Trinity. 3 daughters were confirmed here. In their confirmation classes, I gave them all that information when I tried to get things cleaned out. So as we get old, and 2 of my daughters said they thought they had about 12 in their class, and my one daughter said she thought there were 20 in hers. So those were the good old days.
I think the older times, almost all of the men wore a tie and coat, and that doesn't happen now. Things have changed quite a bit over the time. Some of the special things that we used to see here, when we had the special things like Easter or Christmas, we even had to put extra chairs at the end of each of the pew because the whole system was filled. And then when we had a party in the basement there, everybody would get dressed up. Most of the women would have a long gown. It was very pretty and very special in those days.
We had the men's group and the women's group, and we sort of had a competition to have who could have the best program, and we had some wonderful programs. I just remember one time, and I have no idea what the program was, but I used to play the clarinet, and I played my clarinet and had a snake coming up out of a basket. Who knows what that program was, but we had more fun, and it just was the Holy Trinity was really a wonderful experience for us and for our girls. I think Bill and I have done most of the things that you can do at Holy Trinity. We were both on church council a couple times. I especially did staff support, which I just loved. We even had a big party one time for all the staff, a big dinner. It was really very, very active, and unfortunately we can't be as active anymore, but we have very wonderful memories of what we did do. We both taught Sunday school. I was on Altar Guild. I always read the scriptures. Oh, and the bells.
We thought it was a good idea, so we were significant in urging the church to get with the bells. And the same was true with the...
Well, you were the chairman of the committee that raised the money to get the bells.
We pushed for them, yes.
And I was with the bells from the very beginning. We didn't even know what we were doing, but we learned together and I played with the bells until I got this darn arthritis. I can't get up there anymore, but it was a wonderful experience.
We've had all of the different pieces in the church, and as we get a little older, we figured it's time of us to get out of the way and let younger people take on how the things should be done.
Yeah, it's one of the things was what changes have. If we got into that, we would probably be here for a week and a half just telling you that. So I don't think we'll get into changes in the church since we've been here. It would be 60 years, which is unreal.
In those days too, everybody was young enough that they could hold the whole book to hold it during Christmas instead of having them down to little pieces of paper that you could hold it easily.
Hold the hymnals. Oh dear. Well, let's see. Is there anything else that I said the girls have wonderful memories, and they have continued to be church members as a result of being brought up at Holy Trinity. They loved mother-daughter banquets. We had big elaborate plans and have a wonderful banquet and all kinds of dinners, and it was our family. We always called it Holy Trinity family, and it's still our family. It's still our family.
Hi, my name is Patricia Oley Brook. I was born in 1942 and baptized at the Lutheran Church in Lucas, Ohio. Actually, my dad had two great uncles way back that were Lutheran ministers in Germany. I don't know that they knew Martin Luther, but they were old-time ministers. In 1952, when I was about 6 years old and going into the 5th grade, my parents and I moved on Cook Road here out by the water tower. And beyond the water tower, the road wasn't even paved beyond that. And we joined Holy Trinity Lutheran Church at that time, and there was just the chapel. I remember a Mr. Hins as a Sunday school teacher. Later, I joined Luther League and also the junior choir. The choir director at that time was Janie Brook, and her husband and 3 children also attended here. One time, my dad passed out during a church service, and they carried him out the chapel and laid him on one of the big stones on either side of the walkway out there. I was screaming in church, but it ended up he was okay, he just got too warm. When I graduated from high school and I was in nurses training, I began going to First English Lutheran Church, and went there for a while. Pastor Mitchell was there, and his son Sandy had graduated from high school with me. When I passed my boards and became a registered nurse in 1963, I worked in the ER in the operating room, and there was Mr. Brook, who went to Holy Trinity, who came into the emergency room with chest pain, and it was suggested that he stay overnight. The doctor wanted to observe him overnight, and he refused and went home, and I thought, oh, what a stubborn man. So then one day there was a new hire in surgery, a gal named Jan, and she went to First Lutheran Church, and she was part of a new group called FOIL, Federation of Young Adult Lutherans. And Pastor Smith and Pastor Kunfer were basically our advisors. Mary Lou Brook and another man from Ashland Lutheran Church were kind of in charge of the group. And oh, we had such great times together. And one time we were all going to go camping down in southern Ohio, but I had to work, so I called Mary Lou Brook and said, is anybody going on Saturday? And she said, yes, her brother was. So it ended up I rode down with him. When it came time to come back home, I was going to go with somebody else, and he said he had to drive alone, so I came back with him. Anyway, then we had another gal within the group, and she was dating a young man, and he had an engagement ring for her, but she didn't know that. And in the meantime, he was killed in a tractor turnover accident, and which was so tragic. And I was going to go with the group to the calling hours, but they were all full. And so she said, well, if you can wait and go the next day, my brother's going, so can you go with him? And I said, well, okay. So we ended up going to the funeral home, and then he actually asked me out to go bicycle riding. And that's how we started dating. And so Bob Brook Jr. was the son of Janie Brooke, who was choir director here, and the brother of Mary Lou Brooke, who was the organist. So we dated for 6 months, became engaged for 6 months, and we were married actually down at First English. Then we moved to Cincinnati for 3 years while he got his master's degree. And when he finished that, we moved back to Mansfield, 2 blocks away from Holy Trinity, and we joined Holy Trinity again. Our son was born in 1972. He was baptized here by Pastor Smith, along with our minister from Cincinnati who came up for the service. Then later on, he went through catechism, and we were members of this church for quite a long time. We still belonged to Foyle. We played football. We would go to church as a group, and we just had a good time. As long as Pastor Smith said we were behaving, he was behind us. Pastor Comfort was also part of our group, another Lutheran minister. I was married in 1968. After we came back from Cincinnati, and of course we were members here, at some point there was a program at the First Presbyterian Church, and we went to this program and ended up going to First Presbyterian for a while. Bob, my husband, developed Parkinson's disease and was very attached to the assistant minister at First Presbyterian. And Bob had dementia and had to go to a nursing home. And he died at 67 years old. And the minister at that time was able to do his service. And so later on, I am back to my roots. I'm back at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. It feels like coming home. I'm just real pleased to be here. Pastor Kathy is wonderful. She gives great sermons. I'm now 81 years old, and I'm planning my funeral, which I hope to be held at Holy Trinity. And it's just a great church, and my Christian journey, I know at some point will come to an end, but I'm just grateful to have been a part of Holy Trinity over the years.
Hi, my name is Mark Smith. This is my wife, Debbie. My father was the founding minister of this church. So I've been coming here 74 and some odd years now. My earliest recollection is when they put the new addition on, the Xander Hall they called it then, I don't know what they call it now, where you had Sunday school. Trying to think some other recollections I had young. I always remember walking up the stairs to the first unit here. It was just a long set of stairs. And they built the addition. And back then when they put the addition in, it seemed like we were having a bigger congregation then. We had family nights. I think it was once a month where everybody bring a potluck dinner and filled, I mean, the room was just filled to the brim down there with people. We had a lot of youth back then with Luther League. The fireside room, which is your office now, or which is the pastor's office, it was overflowing with kids with Luther League. So we had that on Sunday nights. And I'm not sure what the size of the congregation was back then, but yeah, it was really hopping back then. So, and obviously I can remember, I asked my brother what he remembers some things, and he agreed with me. We did go to church a lot. There was a lot of functions, so Luther League, conventions, whatever. Moving, the first two houses I lived in were the church parsonages. They were owned by the church, and then when they put the new addition on in '64, we moved to over on Laurelwood, which is just a couple blocks away. So always close to the church. My dad's office was readily available. He was never home, it seemed like it, but being a minister, he had a lot of issues with people in hospitals and certain things would always tear him away with to deal with problems with congregational members, but all in all, it was a good time. And I was married here with my wife in 1983 in the chapel. My kids were baptized here. I've been serving as a head usher since 1989. Seems like after my dad retired. Tried to get me to go there beforehand, but do you have anything you want to add?
I can remember the first time I came to the church, and it wasn't with Mark. It was a friend from high school. And Ray would have been the minister then. I just remember coming that once, and then when I found out he was the minister's son, it's like, oh. Yeah. So as Mark said, we got married in the chapel. Ray had set everything up. It was a beautiful service. He had, where the beams are, he had candles that came down, and they had candle lights in it was an evening service. He had candles put in the windows. It lasted 7.5 minutes. So it was really quick. We had some friends that came in, and as they were coming in, we were leaving, and they couldn't believe the service was already over because they were Catholic and used to the hour-long services. So Mark said both boys were confirmed here. I used to teach Sunday school when they were little, and was also part of the women's club that they had here. And then later on, I was the Altar Guild person, leader, whatever you want to call it. So I did that for 8 or 9 years and decided it was time. I was afraid nobody else would take it over, and so that worked out well. So yeah, a lot of good memories with the church.
Yeah, some of the things I can remember that were troubling at the time is when we ended up moving to Ashland after my parents got divorced. We lived over there for less than a year, and then Dad came back, and things sort of went back to normal. Some of the past members, I miss them. They were very supportive of my dad, the Gottfrieds, Brookses, Broskis, Ernst. They've since passed, but all in all, it's been a good run. So
Mark's mentioned a lot of times about families that have, when his dad was really busy, they would take the boys in for a while and
no, it was
like an overnighter or
being a minister. It's just not a Sunday job. Anybody thinks it is, it isn't. And the congregation back then was a little bit bigger, and I know Dad was, when somebody of, a close friend would die, he took it pretty hard, and you could see the stress on him. He never showed it in public, but some of his closest friends or associates that, church council or whatever, some of those older members, when they passed, it was very stressful for Dad. So, but all in all, we got through it, and
very supportive congregation,
Yeah.
don't you think?
do what?
Very supportive congregation.
Yes, it was. Yeah. Different era. I don't know. One thing that's missing today is the youth. Back then it was, in my era, 50s, 60s. It, church was pretty well filled, and
He has fond memories of the cherub choir,
cherub and junior choir.
Lakeside.
But, you know, it was one of those deals if the cherub choir, I always went to every service, whether I liked to or not, but I did. But, you know, it was junior choir or cherub choir. They always sang different service, or we had something, we had to be there at first service. So I remember talking with my brother when we went to Easter Sunday. It was get up and go to sunrise service, which was 6:30, if I remember right. Then you had the breakfast, and then you had first service, because maybe the choir was singing, and then you had Sunday school, and then you had to finish out the second service. And I was exhausted, but Dad seemed to be okay with it, so it seemed like a long day, but that was,
That was a big service.
yeah, good times.
Your dad also used to do the radio was it
Yeah,
every
he had
Saturday?
radio every Saturday morning, so,
We would listen to that at
Yeah.
home.
the church really grew. I mean, it started out as a small little chapel and grew into the bigger building, and it was filled quite a bit most of the time, so. But I think my dad retired, 89, was it?
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember for sure.
8 or 9 or 90.
So,
45. Yeah, 40 years would have been.
yeah. And the ministers since then, the people that have come and gone, so.
75 years. That's a long time. Did you ever wonder how we got started here? Reverend Zander and Pastor Smith were sent to Mansfield to start a new mission. Reverend Zander was in charge of all the missions in Ohio. When they come into Mansfield, from Springfield, what's Mansfield? They ran into this sign that said Neil Robinson, which was my dad. But Reverend Zander looked at that and said, I know a Neil Robinson. I wonder if it's the same one. He was in my church when we had, at Ohio State, I was one of the ministers, and he came regularly and took part in many things. Wonder if it's the same Neil Robinson. Sure enough, it was. Well, they wanted to come in and explain to Dad what was needed. They laid out a map of Mansfield and the area and wanted to see where the Lutheran churches were. And my goodness, there was a whole void over here on this side of town. So they looked at all the things that were for sale in that area and found this wonderful corner on Cook and Lexington. Well, the Senate got to work and they were working on buying it. But of course, if you have a church, you have to have people. So they had to start trying to find members. Of course, they had to find a place to meet. And the first place they came up with was the Jewish temple, which at the time was right around the corner. Jewish temple wasn't used on Sunday. So we started meeting there, as we grew and things were fine. But then we had a problem. The young people at the Jewish temple kept asking the elders, what's that cross and stuff doing in that storage room? On Saturday they'd see this, and then they had to come out on Sunday. So the elders thought, I don't think we better do any more of this. So they had to find another place to meet. So we met they found the Seventh-day Advent Church. Again, not used on Sunday morning. Pretty nice church, a big church, and it was also their school. So there was plenty of Sunday school room. And we kept growing, and people kept coming. Things were fine. There was one little problem, of course. We only rented the church for Sunday. So we had to have meetings elsewhere. So I remember as a young Luther Leaguer, which was what we called the youth at the time. The Youth League used to meet at the Parsonage down on Westview. We did a lot of things in our Youth League. We had a band and an orchestra. I guess we had a violin or two, so it must have been an orchestra. We went to Columbus because my dad was in the legislature at the time. Went down and saw the mayor, the governor, and all the Columbus scenery, capital. So we kept growing, and finally we were happy to get into our church. We got the chapel. It was gorgeous. We loved it. It was so pretty. When you walked in, you had a beautiful place to hang your coats, and you walked down the aisle the way it looks much today. When you got down in front, there was a bunch of pews that faced each other. That was the choir. I have one of those pews at my home. When they decided to take them out, we bought them. The church organist was where the organist today. Mrs. Brooker was the organist. She was a second grade teacher, and but a wonderful musician. And on the other side was the pastor's office on the east side of the building. It was pretty small, but at that time it was plenty big for the members. Then you went downstairs, and that was really what the youth liked. We went downstairs, and there was a big room, so now we could meet here at the church. On the floor, there was shuffleboard in the tile. Now, shuffleboard was the in thing, and did we feel important? There was a lovely kitchen, and there was a stage. So immediately we started having family nights. Family nights were held once a month. People brought their covered dishes, and we had just a lot of fun. What I remember, a few things about family night. I remember that my mother did a lot of reading. She enjoyed those, and she was good at it. And she would do a reading every once in a while, and there were games. Well, one game I remember in particular, Pastor put a quarter on the saucer, put some flour, about a half a cup of flour on top of the quarter, and he wanted youth to come up. Well, I was too old, you see, but my little brother, he got chosen, and they were to get the quarter without touching it, without touching the quarter. They could touch the saucer, but they couldn't touch the quarter, and they were given a certain length of time. Well, they worked at it, and they worked at it, but my brother come up with an idea. All at once, he went, and the flour went over the whole table. And guess what? There was the quarter. And you know he got to keep it. Now back then, remember, a quarter was worth something for a child. That was one of the games I remember. The next important thing was catechism. We had catechism for 2 years. We had a lot of work and a lot of homework. But finally, we could get confirmed. I was in the third catechism class, 52. Pastor always picked one of the young men, because at that time women weren't allowed to be ministers in the Lutheran church, to be a future minister. He picked in my class Kenny Markley. Well, it didn't really work out real well. Kenny joined the service right out of high school, and he didn't get in to be a minister. I do know of one that did. In the class of 81, Bill Conning was one of the students, and he was chosen to be a minister, and he did become a minister. Got to remember, the girls weren't even in the counting. After you had your catechism, you had to go before the consul, and the consul had to be stern, and they had to ask us all kinds of questions, which was a nervous time for us all, but we all made it. Then we had to, the Sunday that we were confirmed, we had to learn Bible verses, and I was given the whole chapter of Corinthians 13. I thought I was picked on. That is so long, I tell my mom. Well, she said, you'll use it in your life. Pastor knows what he's doing, God knows what he's doing. Learn it. So I had to learn it, word for word, in the King James Version, as a matter of fact. It was long and hard, but I eventually made it. You know, Mom was right, by the way. I did use that many times. The next important thing was when we added Xander Hall in the Sunday school rooms. We were just so crowded that we had to have more room. So they built the Sunday school rooms. They have the fireside room, which we use for the kindergarten class, and then the Sunday school rooms were upstairs. And downstairs was one big room, and it was for receptions and meetings. And it turned out to be very important to me because on July 3rd, 1960, I used it for my wedding reception. It was perfect. It was July 3rd on a Sunday because my husband's family had the history of always having their weddings on the 3rd of July. They had it done for 3 generations. All 3 marriages were marvelous, and who was I to change that? By the way, my 3 children were all married here at the church on July 3rd. After that, we had to go had some important things when a young lady by the name of Mary Lou Brooke, class of 57 in catechism, was doing her music. As I said, women couldn't be ministers, but she did go and she did become a deaconess. And our church had the first deaconess, in fact, the only deaconess that I ever knew. She did a marvelous, and as you know, later went and got her minister degree and became a minister, obviously. There was another person that did that, and that was Carol Ann Burns, and she was in the class of 65 of catechism. She eventually became a minister, and we know her married name is Kilgore, Carol Kilgore. So the next big thing is our new big church. First of all, the pastor got a beautiful office, and he got out of his little one, and we had a reception office. It's as much as it stands today. And the only thing I remember about any controversy was the steeple. We had several choices, and as we talked about it, we eventually picked on the one we have today, of course, the hypodermic. Everyone was kidding, it looked like a hypodermic needle, but then we had so many doctors and nurses in our congregation, it seemed to be appropriate. The next thing I knew, it was 50 years. Sue Salmon and I were on the committee for celebrating 50 years, and we were in charge of the dinners. We had a good time. We had a dinner every month, and it was quite a celebration. Now here we are at 75 years, looking to 100. My catechism verses of Corinthians 13 certainly did come in handy. I had 30 years of teaching public school, kindergarten, junior high, and high school. Better than 30 years of teaching Sunday school here, 2 years of teaching catechism, first year. We had, I was in church council president, and one of the best things, Nancy Collier and I taught through the New Testament, and we had a lot of fun with that. Nancy and I, it was supposed to be a 1-year course, but you know, we made it 5. Now you have to admit, we tried to be very thorough. I also had 63 years of marriage, 3 kids, 3 children, and 6 grandchildren. As you can imagine, I used my Corinthians verses many times during the time, more than you know. And let me end with, now abide in this, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love.